this week's video. In this week's video, we're going to work with one of the compositions that you did last week. So either keep working with the drawing that you did in that 12 by 15 centimetre square, or if you weren't necessarily happy with that composition, maybe start with one of your other ideas that you'd had and go from there. What we're going to now do to this drawing is play with some of the tonal contrasts or some of the tones that are there to increase the level of depth and create a sense of things falling to the back and things coming forward. We're going to use one of the principles of aerial perspective. So aerial perspective is most commonly spoken about in relation to the landscape, and that there are a number of observations that we notice. Things get bluer, the scale of objects gets smaller as they go further back. But one of the principal things regarding tone in relation to aerial perspective is that as things go back, the number of tones that we can see in the object become less, and that also their tonal relationship becomes closer, so that there's not much difference between the tones as they go further back. So if we take those two principles, we can then put them into action with our still life as well, in that to make objects look further back in the still life or sitting at the back, reduce their tones and bring their tones closer, those remaining tones. Let's give it a go. So I'm going to start with the same drawing that I had from last week's, and we're going to just play and alter this around a little bit, thinking about, as I mentioned before, that element of aerial perspective that dictates that as things go further back, they become lesser in tone. So we're using that to do two things. We're using it to help push maybe some of these items or these pairs back, and also to create a sense of focus too, that one of the apples in particular is more important than the others. So it's about increasing the level of tonal contrast and decreasing the level of tonal contrast. And it's not just about the tonal contrast within an object itself, it's how that object relates to its surrounds as well. So say for instance here on this apple, where it's in its darker side here, if I lighten in the background there, it's going to increase the tonal contrast of that and draw attention to that edge. Yet if I start to darken that background and make it similar to the apple there, it's going to lose some of its intensity and some of its focus. And so that apple then starts to sit back. So probably what we're going to do first is start to play maybe a little bit here with our background, and principally be darkening up areas where they're touching darker parts of those apples. And maybe starting to think about creating a secondary compositional. So this was principally a steelyard composition. But if we start to incorporate a second composition, the classic one with that steelyard or the L shape is to have that diagonal. So I can start to create that diagonal by darkening up and working with a sense of a diagonal running down towards this apple, which then also means that again over here I can push that dark against the dark and thus drawing attention away from that edge there. Now we're starting to get maybe some sharpness here in that there's this area of light. Again, with the HP pencil at this stage, I'm going to just knock that back a little bit. Even though originally there was quite a lot of light there, as in light coming from the light source, I maybe don't want this to be too sharp a contrast. And we'll just start to lose some of those other edges maybe over here. Might come in now with the 2H. And further just this area of light across the foreground there. Just put a very light tone across that. Just to enables to put some contrast in there. Remembering that if we leave anything white of the paper, that will start to read as a highlight. If we want to have bright highlights or a sense of a highlight, we need to have pencil covering that area of the paper. Now, it's probably a little bit dark, that dark there. Let's just darken up now some of these. So, let's say I want to pull this apple out as the main motive. This is the supporting, and those other ones are just going to sit back. So, again, it's about surrounding that apple to create contrast. So if we darken up, there's a cast shadow there, and let's darken up that light slightly so it starts to sit back.
And remembering there was another apple just in there, so let's just start to just give him a little bit of something. But this one we're going to keep just as maybe one tone, no more than that. No other definition than that. And so that you can see there is creating a more found edge on here, and by darkening this side we're creating a found edge on this side of the apple. This one up here, we might just start to take out a sense of the reflected light and just help to push it back a little bit. Now all this work that I've done so far is just with the HB and the 2H. I haven't gone into any darker pencils just yet, just to even everything up. And that my control, if I use these harder pencils, is a lot more than if I go in with the dark pencils just at this stage. This means that I've got an ability to subtly control these shifts of tone. So, we're starting to get there. Let's knock the reflected light out of this one. And we're going to darken up just slightly that rim of the bowl there too, or the plate. That light on there is being a little bit distracting. Okay. Now, let's start to come in with some heavier pencils. So we'll come in with the 2B as our first port of call. And what we're going to do is we're going to darken up and simplify over here. By just letting some edges there merge into one. And we're going to start to darken the hump in this apple. Which will travel up through there. And start to just give that a little bit of a dark edge there where it does meet. push that dark down in there. And we're also going to work over the dark in this apple. Keeping that edge there soft, so we're going to come in and now adjust the background again. Find that edge again. And I'm not going to go at 2B right up to the top. I'm going to keep that 2B just in there. Let's work over, we've got HB and we're just going to soften the edge between the dark and the white on this apple because it's starting to get a little strong. Going to change the shape of that one. That one just looks slightly odd. That's better. Keep that nice and soft. Nice and soft. Darken up that cast shadow. there that links into that apple. So I've only got to 2B. Let's now get out 4B. And this is where we're starting to really only decide a few key spots to put that. Let us start to put a little bit more of a darker blush there on that apple. And around it like this, and we're just going to start putting a few other little darks like that, just to start to push it even further, just anywhere where I want to draw, so that I'm upping the contrast around this apple as much as anything as well. Now we don't want the other apples to look completely out. So that's where we'll start to maybe make sure that we put a few of these same darks in this one. Like so. And we're going to just pull that 4B dark over the spoon too, just to help pull that into the foreground too. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a sense of a highlight on this apple, I'm just going to do another with the 2H, another work over it, working from those lights right across into its darks. Just to give it a little bit of a sense of light falling on it. But not the same light that's going to fall on, or the same quality of light, I should say, that's going to fall on this one. Now, with the needle eraser, start to pick out the highlights and the lights. We're actually going, I'm missing a light in this one. So we're going to just pull that out. To there. And this is with a 6H that I'm just working over it. And pulling out the highlight that way. So there we are. So principally, what we have achieved there is to try and create a sense of this apple here having 3, 4, maybe 6 tones. This apple here having 4, 1, this one over here has 3. The one over here has about 5 different tones. The dish has about 2. We've got a cat in the way. The spoon has about 2 different tones in it. The background, there's a little bit of variation there in the background. Now sometimes you could say maybe to have 1 tone in the background. But if you have 1 flat tone in the background, you're going to lose your ability to do some of what I was doing here, where we were lightening and darkening. So rather than just having 1 tone in the background, look for subtle tonal shifts to emphasize and not emphasize. And that would go for areas here in the foreground too. You would slightly alter areas, lighter and darker, to draw attention or to take focus away from them. Just noticing. So for instance, if I want to bring a bit of an edge forward of that tablecloth, or the edge of the we'll just take a little bit of a highlight out or a light out along its edge and do that. So that's the idea of the exercise. Either work with one of the ones that you have done last week, or come up with another new composition, looking at those compositional shapes, and work it up as you would my drawing that I've just done here. I'm also going to show you a demonstration looking at a painting too, and working with the same principles as we've just discussed here now, and working with minimizing the tones in some areas and maximizing the tones in others. So there you go. Have a go. As I said earlier, either begin with a drawing that you started last week and now further develop it, or start with a fresh composition completely and work it up to that point that there is one object that has far more tones than the others, and then this recession in the amount of tones as you go further back into space. Good luck, and I will see you soon.